Hi, welcome to my brand new series, Yoga Off the Mat. My name is Emily. I am a yoga instructor both here on YouTube and in real life in Stamford, Lincolnshire. I wanted to make this series because there's so much to understand about yoga, and we tend to get a little hung up on just talking about the physical poses and the physical part of the practice. But as you will know if you've been practicing yoga for a while, that is just one little element of yoga as a whole. If yoga was a big pie, the asana practice, the physical postures, would just be one little slice. So in this series, there's going to be 10 episodes and I'm going to go into all of those other slices of the pie that make up yoga. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in learning a bit more about, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. I will be uploading all of these 10 episodes over the coming weeks on Wednesdays, and on Sundays I will be uploading yoga flows. So at least for the next little while, there'll be 2 videos a week. In this first episode, I'm going to give you an introduction to yoga and what it's all about, the essence of why we practice yoga, and I'm also going to talk you through, very briefly, the 8 limbs of yoga. If you've never heard of the 8 limbs of yoga before and you have no idea what they are, you are in the right place. This is really important, fundamental yoga knowledge. Okay, so what is yoga? That's a good place to start. Yoga is an ancient set of traditions and practices generally acknowledged to have begun somewhere over 5,000 years ago in India. The purpose of yoga was, and still is, to liberate ourselves from suffering, so both physical suffering and mental suffering, so that we can be more in tune with ourselves and have greater spiritual connection to the universe, the world around us, to one another. So while that still is the intention of practicing yoga for most people and most yoga practitioners, as yoga has moved to the West and has become this billion-dollar industry, there's so much focus on the physical poses, on looking really impressive and selling expensive yoga mats and expensive yoga leggings and things like that. And it means that for a huge group of people who are practicing yoga, the yoga that they're practicing is very distanced and almost divorced from that original meaning and that original purpose. And so I think it's really important for us as Westerners practicing yoga, assuming that many of you watching are also from the Western world, it's really important that we recognize that this is an Indian tradition and that the purpose of yoga is not to get a yoga body. It is self-inquiry, of spiritual connection, of greater awareness of ourselves. Now, when you're looking to learn more about yoga, the best place to start is with the 8 limbs of yoga, as I mentioned before. And I just so happen to have the text right next to me. The 8 limbs of yoga come from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, sage Patanjali compiled this text which gave yoga kind of a system of 8 steps, the 8 limbs of yoga. Up until that point, most of the teachings of yoga were passed down orally from teacher to student. So this is a really important text for yoga practitioners. The sutras originally were written in Sanskrit, so there's a few different kind of interpretations and translations of it. I really recommend this one if you're interested. This is, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, translated and introduced by Alistair Shearer. And so the 8 limbs of yoga, I mean, there's a lot more in the sutras, but the 8 limbs of yoga are something that we really want to understand. So I'm going to try and break down the 8 limbs of yoga as briefly as I can, and then in future videos in this series, I'm going to go into a bit more detail. So let's get into those 8 limbs and what they are. Now, before I start saying all of the Sanskrit words, I'm just going to apologize in advance if I do mispronounce anything. Any Sanskrit speakers out there, please leave in the comments below any words that I am pronouncing wrong and let me know so I can do a little better in future. So the first 2 limbs of yoga are 2 things that kind of come together. We have the yamas and the niyamas. The yamas and niyamas are moral guidelines designed to help us lead a balanced life. I'm going to go through them very, very briefly without too much explanation right now. And in the next video in this series, episode 2 is going to be all about the yamas and niyamas and how you can apply them to your life. There's 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. The 5 yamas, we have number 1, which is ahimsa, meaning non-violence. Number 2, satya, meaning truthfulness. Number 3, asteya, non-stealing. Number 4, brahmacharya, right use of energy. And number 5, aparigraha, non-greed or non-attachment. Those are the 5 yamas, so those are things that we should try not to do, kind of restraints. Then the 5 niyamas are, number 1, saucha, meaning cleanliness or purification. Number 2, santosha, contentment. Number 3, tapas, discipline. Number 4, svadhyaya, self-study. And number 5, ishvara pranidhana, surrender to a higher power. So I will go into much more detail on those in the next video. Make sure you stay tuned. I will put a link to it in the description below once that video is uploaded. So those are the first 2 limbs of yoga, and they might sound really simple, but as you will see in the next video in this series, there is a lot more depth and complexity and sort of nuance to those to go into. So in order to do your physical practice right and to move on through the different stages of the 8 limbs of yoga, you need to make sure that you are doing all of those things and that you're upholding those values in your life. Limb number 3 is the asana practice. This is the physical postures that you may be pretty familiar with if you've been doing yoga for some time. But the thing that might surprise you is that the purpose of the asana practice was actually only really to make your body more flexible, so you're more comfortable sitting in stillness so that you can meditate without having a bad achy back. So really the purpose of doing all of these incredible different poses and postures was to allow yourself to then sit comfortably in stillness for contemplation, meditation. Limb number 4 is pranayama, which is the breath control, so the breathing exercises that we do in yoga. And again, there will be an episode in this series all about pranayama and the meaning of prana, our life source, this subtle energy that moves around our body. There's so much more to pranayama than just doing some breathing exercises, so definitely stay tuned for that episode. So once you've done those first 4 stages, you've thought about the way that you're living your life, the yamas and the niyamas, the moral disciplines and guidelines. Once you've done your physical practice and removed sort of aches and pains in the physical body, and once you've done your breathing practice to calm the mind, we then get into the more meditative, I'm never sure if I'm saying that word right, the parts of the limbs that go towards meditation and heading towards the idea of enlightenment. Limb number 5 is pratyahara, which is sense withdrawal. So this is when we close our eyes, we remove all the distractions and we start to distance ourselves from the world around. Limb number 6 is dharana. So once we've done the pratyahara, we've removed all of our external distractions, we can move into focused concentration, dharana. It's a fixed point of focus. This is the part where we're really trying to concentrate and remove all of the noisiness in the mind. And so then once we've kind of mastered that, and it can take a lot of practice, years of practice, we may then reach limb number 7, which is dhyana or meditation. So actually reaching that state of meditation where your mind is clear, you're still aware and conscious of things around you, but you are removed from them and you're in this state of complete focus and concentration. And then through lots of meditation practice, you may reach the final limb, number 8, samadhi, meaning bliss or enlightenment. So reaching this higher state of being where you are truly at one with yourself, free from suffering, living a peaceful, harmonious life. So that's the end goal, essentially, for yogis. That's why we practice, to try and move through these stages and get to that state of enlightenment. Sounds simple, doesn't it? So there's a lot of work that goes into a yoga practice beyond the asana, the physical postures. I know there's so much more that I could say about the 8 limbs of yoga, and I will later on in this series, but if there are any specific questions that you have about any of the stuff I've just said, please leave your questions in the comments below. So I'll leave it there for episode 1. That was an introduction to yoga, what it's all about, and the 8 limbs of yoga, which we're going to explore in much more detail later on in this series. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you soon.